Go.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm just going to give it probably a minute or so for more people to join. But as folks are, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're tuning in from and maybe something that you're looking forward to doing this fall or something that you've done that you've enjoyed. I know for me, I went apple picking and made an apple crisp, and that just checked off one of my favorite fall things to do. Someone says corn maze. I almost did that. That is also very fun. Okay, I think we have a pretty full group here. So in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for taking some time out of your evening to join us for this Weatherization Wednesday. I want to note that we are recording the session and it's going to be posted to the buttonupvermont.org website and to Efficiency Vermont's YouTube afterwards. So if you have to hop off for any reason, you're more than welcome to watch the recording or send it to someone who couldn't make today's session. So today, obviously, we are talking about weatherization, which I know is really top of mind for a lot of folks as kind of colder temperatures are approaching and the heating season is right around the corner. So excited to be joined by some great colleagues of mine at Efficiency Vermont, Robin King and Bruce Courteau, who are going to be leading today's presentation and talking with you all about how you can weatherize your homes. Before I turn it over to them, though, I am just going to quickly introduce myself and run through some webinar logistics. So my name is Becca Custer. I'm a community engagement manager at Efficiency Vermont and help to lead the Button Up Vermont campaign, which is Vermont's annual campaign to help Vermonters prepare for winter and think about weatherizing their homes. Efficiency Vermont is the sponsor and facilitator of the Button Up campaign. So if folks are not familiar with who we are a statewide energy efficiency utility. We serve every town, county, city, town in Vermont, except for Burlington. And really what we do is we help reduce the cost of energy for all people living in Vermont and really help families and businesses understand and make better use of their energy and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We are just one of the many partners that supports the Button Up campaign. We have other partners across the state, including our weatherization agencies, utilities, nonprofits, regional planning commissions, town energy committees, and several more partners. And as Robin switched the slide, yes, we have one of our fantastic partners on the call with us today as our co-host, VGS. VGS provides natural gas service, heat pumps, and efficiency programs in Chittenden, Franklin, and Addison counties. So we have Tim Perrin from VGS on the call with us today. I want to thank Tim so much for being here. And if folks are VGS customers or have questions about their services, which we'll outline a little later in the presentation, feel free to put your questions in the chat. There's Tim, and he can answer them there. Next slide. Oh, quickly, before I turn it over to this, which is very exciting, I want to just open it up to other partners if you're on the call to feel free to share in the chat if there are any kind of local efforts that you're doing that folks on this call can get involved in. I know there's a lot of in-person events being planned and already planned that folks on this call could attend. So feel free to share information about that there. And then, yes, we are giving away a $50 gift card to one attendee randomly drawn to a local hardware store. We're going to do that drawing after the webinar to save time, but just know if you are that lucky winner, you can expect an email from us in the coming days. Next slide. So quick run through of the agenda. We're going to be obviously talking about weatherization and why it's important. Bruce is going to give an overview of really what it means to weatherize and why it's important in not only reducing your energy costs, but also keeping you warm and comfortable in your home all year long. And then Robin is going to talk about how you can really get started with your weatherization journey, sharing some of the different services available to you, including an energy assessment of your home to identify some energy saving opportunities, help with finding a contractor to do that work, different rebates and incentives on this work and financing to help reduce the upfront cost. And then we'll have about 20 or so minutes for Q&A after the presentation. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. And we're gonna start with some of the questions that we got submitted through registration. Thanks to the folks that submitted those. Those were really great questions. So we'll start there and then turn it over to questions we're getting in the chat. If you are joining us here on Zoom, please put your questions in the chat function here. And if you are on Facebook, if you could put your questions in the comments. Okay, I feel like I ran through all the logistics. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bruce.
Well, thanks, Becca, and thanks everyone for letting us come by tonight. So I guess the point here is, why is weatherization important? And typically and we can advance the slide. When we talk about weatherization, we're really talking about air sealing and insulation. And oftentimes they use the analogy of the jacket and the sweater. The jacket is the air sealing and the sweater is the insulation. And they'll actually work better if they're in contact with one another. Typically, buildings lose energy in two ways. Through conduction, it moves through a solid, and through convection, the movement of air. So the air sealing and the insulation address both of those heat losses. We could advance the slide. Here's another example, the idea of a cooler. Insulation keeps you warm in the winter, and it keeps you cool in the summer. The idea here is we also need a tight fitting lid, because we can have good insulation. And if we don't have good air sealing, then they don't work as well. They work much better together when we have the air sealing and the insulation at their optimum. So we can move on to the next slide. One of the things about buildings that people don't necessarily understand sometimes is, whenever you heat something, you pressurize it. And so oftentimes when the warm air wants to leak out of the top of the building, typically it's pulling in cool air at the bottom of the building. It's what's known as the stack effect. So we could advance the slide. We could advance the slide. So oftentimes when we take a look at buildings, and existing buildings, normally we're headed to attics and basements because we can get access to those locations. And this is sort of one of the ways we sort of look at a building. We start at the attic oftentimes because we get access there, and oftentimes there's good energy savings that can be had there. And sort of the one is this: if the insulation would be at the slope of the attic, then we would look at that. That would be a vaulted ceiling or a cathedral ceiling. If it's at the flat, then that would be a flat attic application. And then oftentimes we go to the rim joist, which is number 3, the perimeter of the floor system, which sits upon the concrete or the stone. Oftentimes it's very leaky, and many times is not very well insulated. So it suffers from both conductive and convective heat loss. And then we obviously get down into the basement foundation walls. The basement foundation walls, to me, they're very similar. And so oftentimes what we're doing there is we're insulating from the interior of the foundation because we get access there. So we could advance the slide. So I guess one of the things that needs to be, oftentimes before we can move into air sealing and insulation, we need to address certain things before that can happen. One is moisture. These insulating products are not moisture products for the most part, so you would need to address any sort of moisture problems in basements. And here's an example of water that's being seeped in through concrete cinder block wall. If in fact there's asbestos, then that would be it probably in the form of vermiculite in a flat attic or sometimes in a wall assembly. So that would also need to be addressed before. Theoretically, we don't want to disturb asbestos, so that would be a professional remediation. And once again, if there's any sort of structural damage, then that would be needed to be addressed prior to any sort of air sealing and insulation. So we can advance the slide. So one of the things that we often don't necessarily think about is that it turns out people live, like 80 or 90% of their lives inside a building. And so the idea of indoor air quality is starting to take more center stage. And so a lot of what goes on here is in the weatherization process, we often address some of the air sealing issues because we are eliminating a lot of the leakage through the house. And once we do that, then oftentimes we can start to control some of the ventilation strategies that need to be addressed once we start to button houses up and make them more airtight. Once again, working with the sort of contractors, when you get into the more advanced parts of air sealing and insulation, there's a lot of testing that goes on. So those are all certain important things that we work with in our program. We could advance the slide. So once again, these are sort of the things. Obviously, we want to save money and we want to save energy, but oftentimes people don't necessarily think about comfort. And so that is often a big piece of what happens. And historically, people have often talked about, well, what's the payback, or how am I going to get my money back? You know, where's the return on investment? But oftentimes, people consider comfort to be a very important thing. And in certain ways, the weatherization industry has sort of taken a hold of that, and they sort of emphasize that more than they have in the past. And obviously, the idea of reducing greenhouse gas emissions with the reduced use of fossil fuel is very important to all of us. So we could advance the slide.
I think it's over to me, Bruce.
I think so, Robin.
Well, thank you for that starter, Bruce. I'm Robin King. I'm the Existing Homes Program Manager at Efficiency Vermont. So my portion of the presentation is going to be talking a little bit about the programs that are available both through Efficiency Vermont and across the state, just so that folks can really access weatherization at the point in the journey that makes most sense for them. So I would be remiss not to mention that Efficiency Vermont offers free virtual home energy visits. My colleague Bruce here handles a lot of these virtual home energy visits, and it's convenient access to folks that we have in-house at Efficiency Vermont, like Bruce, who can speak to you about your home's specific issues or areas for improvement. So it's a really nice way to get a little bit of a snapshot of what's happening in your home and ideas that you might have for improvement. And you can kind of talk to someone to think about what might make the most sense for you. After the virtual home energy visit, which typically lasts about 90 minutes, you receive a personalized list of recommendations from one of our in-house staff that looks over the types of things that you talked about on the call. So we do have a sign up link within this presentation. You can also find it on our website. Very much encourage folks to sign up if they're interested. And I'd like to note that while this is called a free virtual home energy visit, there are ways to participate if you don't have access to a phone or a smartphone kind of camera or a computer. We do encourage folks to use their landlines if they need to call in and talk about what they're interested to talk in about. So there's lots of ways to participate in this, and we're happy to meet you where you're at. So highly recommend. It's a great service that we can provide if you're just getting started and kind of want to know what opportunities your home might have. So certainly feel free to visit our website and learn more about how you can sign up. And if you're feeling like you might not know how to get to our website, or you'd rather have help with scheduling one of these, we do have our customer support line here at the end of the presentation, and you're more than welcome to call in and have someone walk you through that scheduling process. Really happy to meet you where you're at. In terms of weatherization programs, I'm going to be covering a few that both we and some of our partner organizations offer. So I'll be walking through a little bit more about the Weatherization Assistance Program, the Do-It-Yourself Weatherization Program at Efficiency Vermont, the Home Performance with Energy Star program, our Building Performance Program, which looks at commercial and mixed-use buildings. And last but not least, I just wanted to address right now that oftentimes I think people can really focus on windows as a form of improvement on their home. And while a lot of our programs really don't provide direct incentives for windows, it's because as an energy efficiency utility, we really are very mindful of the types of improvements that can offer a return for customers. And windows are often fairly expensive and sometimes don't produce the energy saving benefits that a lot of people hope to see. There's a lot that can be done around windows, which I'm sure Bruce would be happy to get to in the Q&A if folks have questions. But windows themselves can typically be a pretty expensive option and may not actually return the energy investment that you made. So I just wanted to note that, because sometimes we do get a lot of questions around windows. So just wanted to note that up front. Okay, so to dive right in, there are a lot of programs available for folks who are income eligible. One of the primary programs that's available across the state is the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is provided by the state of Vermont through the community action agencies. So these are free weatherization services that are available for eligible households. The map that you're seeing on screen shows which community action agency serves different areas in Vermont. So there are a number of organizations across the state providing these services, and on the map are both their names in acronym format for the most part, as well as phone numbers. So we highly recommend that you contact your community action agency to get started to see if you qualify for these free weatherization services. All of their numbers are available on screen, but certainly they do have a web presence. And if you're like me and sometimes squint at the screen to see where you might land on one of these maps, again, highly recommend that you visit the website of the Weatherization Assistance Program to learn more about where you might land on this map and what community action agency might serve you. The program that's hosted by Efficiency Vermont that sponsors weatherization projects for Efficiency Vermont customers is called the Home Performance with Energy Star program. What we do is we work with a partner network of contractors called the Efficiency Excellence Network. They are folks who are trained in building science and in doing weatherization projects. And if you take on a weatherization project with one of the Efficiency Excellence Network contractors, and you specifically name that you're interested in Home Performance with Energy Star, you would be eligible to receive 75% back of project costs, either up to $4,000 or $9,500, depending on whether or not you're income eligible, which can really make a difference in terms of starting your project. And if this feels like kind of a thing that you'd like to belay the upfront cost of, we do have financing programs, which I'll cover a little bit later in the presentation, that can break up these costs into monthly payments. So there are ways to start your project without having to have that upfront cost in your pocket. These Efficiency Excellence Network contractors we know are very busy in this heating season, so we definitely encourage folks to contact a few contractors if you're interested in getting your project started. And these are independent contractors that you can work with that do know the program rules. So they're more than happy to serve folks within their areas across the state. We also have a do-it-yourself weatherization rebate program. How this works is you would complete 3 eligible projects that are listed on our website, and you'd be able to receive $100 cash back. The types of projects that are in the DIY or do-it-yourself weatherization program include air sealing and insulating attics and basements, weatherizing windows and doors, installing new windows or window inserts, and insulating hot water pipes. So there's a lot of different options to choose from. There's a lot of great information and tutorials available on our website on how to do these kinds of things. And certainly back to that virtual home energy visit, folks like Bruce are more than happy to talk about what you might be able to do yourself and how to do it. So if you're feeling like you want to participate in that program, but you need a little extra help, please do sign up for a virtual home energy visit. I'd just like to note that comprehensive weatherization through both the Home Performance with Energy Star program or VGS's program does not necessarily equal do-it-yourself weatherization. So there are a number of types of projects that are really within the wheelhouse of most homeowners, including weatherizing windows, so doing things like caulking or installing weather stripping. Weatherizing exterior doors, insulating pipes, those kinds of things are things that people can often do around their homes themselves. But when it comes to comprehensive air sealing or insulation in attics and basements and walls, it's really recommended that you engage with a Home Performance with Energy Star contractor, one of those Efficiency Excellence Network contractors, because they're really the folks who know how your house works as a system and what they need to look at and consider in looking at the total health and safety of your home, and also how air sealing and insulation might impact other systems in your home. So highly recommend that you check out our Efficiency Excellence Network to start thinking about who you might partner with for your project. We also, through lending partners that we partner with at Efficiency Vermont, offer the home energy loan, which is a great option to access low or no interest financing for your project. Here on the screen, we have general guidelines of the loan program. So you can kind of do a self-assessment of where you might fall and what interest rate you might be eligible for. But this program covers a range of projects, including weatherization and heat pumps and wood heating system and appliances. So there's a lot of different options available through this program. We have VSECU here on the line with us. So if anyone has questions for them specifically, I know Lisa is more than happy to help answer those questions. But this is a really great program that, again, helps kind of defray those upfront costs that sometimes are not available to take on a project. So it's a really great way to break up that project cost into monthly payments that can be more affordable. The next program that we offer at Efficiency Vermont, in partnership with Burlington Electric Department, Vermont Gas Systems, VHFA, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, as well as our distribution utility partners, is the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Program. Mia Watson is here from VHFA if anyone does have questions for them specifically about the REP program. But this program is a great way to pay for your weatherization project. It also offers no upfront costs. There's the option to repay on your utility bill for a term of up to 15 years. So it's a nice way to kind of consolidate the payments for your weatherization project right on the utility bill that already comes to your home. The projects that are available through the REP program are weatherization or weatherization plus efficient space and water heating. We have a list of participating contractors on our website if you're interested in knowing more about who you can partner with on your project. And these projects are cash flow positive on an annual basis. So we can do an assessment to see if your project is eligible as you're working through it with your contractors. And I'd just like to mention that this is available with certain utilities at the moment. So feel free to contact Efficiency Vermont to see if your utility is participating. But yes, very happy to be offering this program and really appreciate the partnership with VHFA to make it happen. We, as I mentioned, we have our contractor network called the Efficiency Excellence Network. This is a diverse group of contractors, installers, and retailers. These folks are trained to deliver services related to the installation of efficiency technologies and services. These are folks who are vetted and managed by Efficiency Vermont. So we help them access certifications and education that help them install projects at your home. If you're interested in knowing more about how you can access one of these Efficiency Excellence Network members, we have a listing at the link located here. It's called Find a Pro or Retailer. You can enter in what you're looking for specifically and have a listing of contractors available to you based on where you live. So it's a great tool to find out who you can partner with and how to start your project. And our partner VGS is here on the line, but we have this slide to kind of outline what's available through VGS. So they have really robust weatherization rebates up to $3,500 or $5,000 for homeowners. There's also a lot of offers available for multifamily homes, mobile homes, and condos. So please do visit the VGS website. They also offer 0% financing through Green Mountain Credit Union. So lots of great offers available for both Efficiency Vermont customers and VGS customers. So please do visit our websites to see what you might qualify for. I'm going to turn it back over to Becca, who's going to carry us through the finish line of the presentation so that we can answer any questions that have come through the chat. And I'm just going to advance to the next slide so that Becca can tell you how to do your weatherization project.
Thank you, Robin, and thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I think it's helpful because we went through a fair amount of content to just think about some very concrete next steps that you can take depending on kind of where you are in this weatherization journey. I want to just call out that you can always give our customer support at Efficiency Vermont a call. They are a fantastic resource and can answer any questions you have and really look at your situation to figure out what programs you might qualify for and what might be a really good next step for you. So I encourage you to call if you have questions. Again, a really good first step if you're not really sure, where you might be losing energy and improvements you can make. You can sign up for that free virtual home energy visit, which Robin mentioned. you can sign up online, but you can also give customer support a call for that as well. And I know for Vermont Gas customers, they can also request a home energy evaluation. And if you're ready to do that comprehensive project, that's a really good opportunity to use our Find a Pro page to connect with one of the Efficiency Excellence Network contractors to do that work. And as Robin mentioned, the community action agencies across the state administer the Weatherization Assistance Program. So if you think you might qualify for that, highly encourage you call your local community action agency. Next slide. I do also want to mention that we are hosting 2 more Weatherization Wednesdays throughout the month of October. We're going to be focusing next on heat pumps. So we have a session next Wednesday, October 18th at noon, and then we're hosting it again October 25th at 6 p.m. I have been seeing a lot of questions coming into the chat, and also we got some questions submitted during registration. People have a lot of questions about heat pumps, which is fantastic, and I highly encourage you to register for those sessions and pose your questions there. Next slide. I also mentioned earlier that we have great partners across the state supporting this campaign, and several of them are hosting in-person, local, and regional events. So here are just a few that are upcoming. So if you are located in the Northeast Kingdom or in the Weybridge area, I highly encourage you to check out these events. And there are many events in the works being planned right now. So feel free to check out the buttonupvermont.org website to see if there's some events in your area being hosted. I think with that, we are done with the presentation. So I would love to turn it over to questions now. We've definitely been getting some in the chat, but feel free to keep putting them there. And while we're getting questions in, I think it would be good to address some of the questions that we got in that folks submitted during registration. So Robin, you mentioned a little bit about windows and why we don't have rebates on replacement. But we did get some questions in about what can people do if they're not looking to replace their windows, but want to do some things to help insulate and weatherize their windows. So curious, maybe Bruce or Robin, if you guys have some suggestions for folks on some maybe affordable ways to do that.
Well, I'd be more than happy to give a couple ideas. So it turns out glass isn't the greatest insulating material. And so, but if you can seal the window up, make it more airtight, caulk it, seal it, reglaze it, put new glass in it, then you can stop the wind from blowing through it. That's the first thing you want to be doing. But you can add additional layers to that glass. You could add traditional triple track storms to the outside. You could do insulated shades on the inside, the honeycomb shades. There's a product or a program called where they build interior storms. And so window they build them window dressers. Yeah, I'm sorry. And that's another really affordable, viable way to upgrade an existing window. And it's an interior storm that slides into the window sash, and it actually adds 2 additional layers of air, one in the wrap of the frame itself and one between the existing sash. And so they actually perform quite well. It's a community-based effort. So that's another thing that you can do. So all of those would be good. And it's certainly important to weather strip and air seal any exterior door and window in the house, because once again, we're always trying to slow down the amount of air that's traveling through these houses.
And the only thing that I have to add is if you do take on one of those projects to weatherize windows or to do one of the actions that Bruce mentioned in terms of installing an interior window insert or helping to kind of create that pocket of air between the interior and the exterior window, we do have the DIY weatherization rebate that you're able to take advantage of if you do participate in one of those programs and you decide to address your windows. So there is the opportunity to get some cash back for those kinds of activities.
Great. We also had a question about what can be done quickly before winter. And I think this is probably recognizing that contractors are busy and weatherization projects, comprehensive weatherization projects might not be able to be done this winter. And so I think the DIY projects are a great place to start. If you go on that page, there's a lot of different instructions on how to do certain projects, but I'm curious if Bruce, maybe you have any additional suggestions or just potentially like highest impact do-it-yourself projects that folks can take on.
Well, once again, I think the doors are really an important thing, because there's many doors in many houses, even like bulkhead doors and basement doors. I mean, if you think about that analysis of trying to pull in cold air at the bottom of the building and leak out to the top, all the doors are typically down in the basement or on the first floor. So all the weather stripping and air sealing and latching is really it's not like rocket science, but if you can get those doors to seal up better, that's really an important piece.
Great. We had another few questions come in kind of about project prioritization. Someone asked, with limited funds, is it better to invest in weatherization or a new heating system? In this person's case, they were referring to a new furnace. I'm not sure about the condition of the heating system, but I'm assuming it's in working condition and they're just thinking of upgrading. I think this could also be relevant to folks that are thinking of maybe upgrading to a heat pump or other heating system.
Well, typically, smart money says is to fix the house as soon as possible and reduce the amount of energy that you need to be comfortable. And I mean, if you have a functioning heating system, then you will reduce the need for the fuel for that heating system. But certainly, the building is the long haul. So usually, that's the first place you go. And if, in fact, you do a great job of weatherizing the building, when you do a new heating system, then you can size it accordingly because it shouldn't be as big as the one that was there before because the house is better.
We had a few other questions coming in about what renters can do when it comes to weatherization, recognizing that they can't make a lot of structural changes to their apartment. So curious if you guys have any thoughts there.
I'll just note that the virtual home energy visit service is available both to homeowners and renters. So certainly if you're looking to pick the brain of someone on things that you can do around your rental unit, that is a great place to start. I will note that oftentimes we don't necessarily know as Efficiency Vermont what you have agreed to with your property owner in terms of your lease. So certainly before you embark on anything specific, we absolutely recommend that you check in with your property owner and take a look at your lease to see what is doable within your home. But outside of that, I'm going to pass it to Bruce, who I know has these kinds of conversations all the time.
Well, I think the most important thing is to have a conversation with your landlord, because oftentimes people don't, they assume that the landlord is not going to be interested in doing this, but that's the landlord's property. And so certainly that is not uncommon for people to be surprised by the fact that the landlord is sort of on the same page as they are. So that would be the first thing, is don't avoid the conversation with your landlord. And we've had some virtual home energy visits where we have the landlord and the tenant on the visit. And it can be a really rewarding sort of time for both of them, because we can talk about the building and we can make the building better. So that would be one of the things. And once again, we're going to back up again and sort of look at the weatherization, any sort of inexpensive weather stripping, that sort of caulking, sealing, big holes closed up, those sort of things. They're not huge amounts of money, but they can make a really big difference.
I don't know, this is a very popular question, so I'm going to ask it here, and I know it was asked in the last session. Is it important to insulate hot water pipes?
Yes, you want to keep the heat in the pipe and not dissipating out into the basement. Now, it's not a huge saving, but it's one of those things, once it's done, it's there forever. And as the price of fuel goes up, then that savings just gets even better. So it's not, and the other thing is, it's not really that difficult to do. It's really, and as Robin pointed out, that's one of the things on the list for the $100 DIY. So that would be a really good one. Yep.
Right. We also had some questions about kind of tricky home situations. Someone asked about how to go about weatherizing a log cabin. I don't know how many people have log cabins, but I think it's pretty common in Vermont. So curious if you have advice there, Bruce.
Well, one of the things about a log house is that it's made out of wood, and wood is not the best insulating material. Now, if you have the big, huge logs, then you get a better R value, but there's a lot of seams in the wood. So oftentimes with log houses, we're often looking at other places in the building where we can sort of gain back some of what we forfeited by the fact that we started with a sort of mediocre insulating material in the walls. And that would be, once again, windows, doors. If there are flat attics, oftentimes in log cabins, they have cathedral ceilings, so that can be sort of difficult. But if there's a flat attic and you can add more insulation to the attic space, that's certainly beneficial. So you're really trying to gain where, if there's a foundation in the building, a concrete foundation, and there's no insulation there, that's a great place to start, because concrete has really, really worse than wood. And so obviously you'd be insulating a part of the building that is right now a major heat loss. And so the idea with sort of log houses is, the other thing is occasionally you can caulk or chink them you can sort of air seal the gaps. Usually what happens with a log house, after a certain amount of time, it settles into its sort of space and it doesn't shrink and expand as much as it did when they're first built. And at that point, there are certainly companies that do sort of air sealing from the outside when they, paint them or, put a seal on them. So that's another thing that you might want to look into.
Right. And Bruce, because you said R value, I'm going to ask what that means.
So R value is the resistance to heat loss. So the higher the number, the better. And they rate all the different building materials in a per inch R value. So if you had a 1-inch thick wood door in your house, it would have an R value of 1. So if you have an 8-inch log in your log house, then it would have an R value of 8. So that's just an example. The rigid foam products, the blue board, the pink board, are 5 per inch. Really big difference. So each product has its own place, has its own R value, depending upon how much space you have to put in the insulation. Those are all the sort of things that people look at when they design or upgrade existing houses.
Great. The last one on that kind of note, someone says they have a Cape style home and the eave section has some insulation, but they need more. And they have some questions on how to insulate this section.
Yeah. So I think by the eave section, maybe you're talking about what's also known as the knee wall, is a little short false wall that, it's got a little storage door in there. Ideally, what happens with the home performance contractors is they often talk about change. If in fact you insulate down the slope and then you get to that little knee wall and you've insulated the knee wall, then ideally you need to insulate the floor that's beyond the knee wall because there's heated living space underneath that. Ideally, oftentimes they change that insulating detail and they sort of say, just forget the knee wall and the floor and just insulate down the slope. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And so it would be less material. And oftentimes in older capes, on the outside of the building, on the gable end, you'll see a small little louver. And that louver is to vent that space because it gets so hot in the summertime. So one of the things that you might want to think about doing is sort of changing where the insulation is and moving it to the slope, taking it right out to the outside of the wall. And that allows you to insulate it better and air seal it better.
Right. We have some questions on energy audits. I just want to address a comment that we saw in the chat, just saying that they had gotten an energy assessment and it cost $400. I just want to note that's probably an energy audit and not one of our free virtual home energy visits, which is a more comprehensive assessment of your home. But Robin, I'm curious, someone also asked in the questions coming in, do audits still exist? What are they and how can I get one?
It's a great question. Audits definitely still exist. A lot of the contractors on the Find a Pro listing are available to provide an energy audit, which is really a comprehensive look at the energy that's used in your house and what kinds of improvements you can make that would have an impact on both the energy use from an energy perspective, but also oftentimes cost savings that might be associated with the types of improvements that might be recommended. So it's a great snapshot of kind of what's happening in your house, again, kind of thinking of your house as a system, and then what kinds of improvements might be kind of the highest and best, or what would be recommended for your individual home. So the folks that are on our Efficiency Excellence Network can provide a lot of support in getting audits for your homes. There is a range of kind of what's available for services for audits. So I definitely recommend that if you're interested in an audit, you reach out to someone on that list and talk about generally when you're trying to sign up for one, what you're interested in knowing and seeing if that contractor is going to be a good match in terms of what you hope to get out of the audit and what they can provide, because every business is just a little bit different. But they're energy experts. They're definitely thinking in that kind of comprehensive way. So it's a great way to get started, just to see kind of what's happening in your house, what areas are there for improvement, and what kind of improvements would be in alignment with what you're hoping to get from your improvement project.
Great. Someone asks, now I think we're turning it over to chat questions. Someone asked, do you give the same service to both primary and secondary homeowners?
It's an interesting question. Some of our programs are more oriented towards primary residences that are occupied. So the home energy loan comes to mind. It is available for second homes as well, but one of the requirements of the home energy loan is that the home is owner occupied. There is available support through the Home Performance with Energy Star program for both primary and secondary homes. So certainly if you have a secondary home in the state of Vermont and you're interested in weatherizing it, there would be incentives available for you for that home, so long as you're the person who's kind of responsible for and signing off on the project. There are some available programs as well for properties that have management companies taking care of them. So if that's kind of what you have as your setup, feel free to reach out to us to talk through what that process looks like for you. But yeah, support for all different types of properties. And I think Mia from VHFA put this in the chat, but if you do have a rental property or you are a renter yourself, the RAP program is available for weatherization projects at rental properties as well. So there are kind of a number of support services available. It all kind of depends on where you fall in that trajectory, and we're more than happy to talk through with you what options are available to you so you can think through what makes the most sense for your situation.
Great. We have another question. It's someone asks, I have a standing seam metal roof with foam board insulation under it. I do not have an attic, so is there anything further I can do to keep warm air from escaping to the great outdoors?
Well, you could certainly possibly do some air sealing if, in fact, once again, if you did a blower door test or you had some way to quantify how tight the building is. But for the most part, with a cathedral ceiling, you're sort of limited by the thickness of either the framing, or in your case, it sounds like they did a rigid foam board somewhere in that assembly. And so there's really not a lot more room to add insulation. If you have, sometimes if you have a sort of an old clunky roof and it's time to be repaired or replaced, then that gives you the opportunity to add some additional foam board to the deck. It can be a big sort of lift because then you have to change all the jet work, all the trim work, all the soffit and the fascia, the trim around that, because you're adding depth to the ceiling or to the roof. But for the most part, that's a difficult one. So really, the air sealing would be the piece that you would really take a look at there, because the insulation is already in place. So.
That's great. Earlier, I think when we were talking about asbestos, someone asked, can you cover it or does it have to be removed?
Well, I believe what the speculation is you can't disturb it. So if you, and ideally, if you're going to cover it up, then you're going to disturb it. So I guess one of the things that there is a class action suit, there is some money available to help people to remediate it. And so, and I've worked on a couple of projects where that's happened. So that may be something to think, but usually, people just sort of say, oh my gosh, we can't go there. But I sort of look at it differently. I feel like if we're going to go there, we should go there as soon as possible and get it out of the way, and then we can upgrade the building. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but there is, I think it's up to $4,000 worth of support from that class action suit. And so you could certainly do a little research, or you could certainly call customer service and we can get you in touch with that program as well.
And to piggyback off of what Bruce was saying, both financing programs, the home energy loan and the RAP program, do provide some support for health and safety that could include vermiculite remediation. So there are some terms and conditions to those programs, but just know there is some financing support available for those health and safety costs that often need to happen for the weatherization project to move forward and other projects to move forward. So if that feels like a daunting thing to do, just know that we're here to support you. Yeah.
Good. Great. Betsy in the chat asks, is an energy audit mandatory before a contractor does a weatherization project that would be eligible for a rebate?
Great question. So one of the things that we do require for the Home Performance with Energy Star program is that someone achieve a 10% air leakage reduction between the start of their project and the conclusion of their project. So really focusing on that air sealing aspect of weatherization that Bruce mentioned, and hopefully that goes hand in hand with insulation as well throughout your weatherization project. And in order for us and your contractor to know that you've met that requirement, we do request that contractors perform what's called a blower door test at both the beginning and the end of your project, in addition to some diagnostic testing that generally should happen at every project, just to make sure, again, that any improvement that you make is going to positively affect the health and safety of your home. So while we don't necessarily specify exactly what happens in the assessment or audit beyond kind of some baseline best practices guidance for how you might assess a home before a weatherization project. We do require that testing to make sure that the project is meeting the program standards. And Bruce, I know that you have had a lot of interaction with these programs over time. So if you have anything to add about blower door testing, happy to entertain it. But if you want to move on, totally fine as well.
Well, one of in the virtual home energy visits, oftentimes this comes up. And ideally, what we're allowing these contractors to do, when you're going to communicate with a contractor, it should be the kind of question that you want to ask, because some people want a more detailed report. You know, it's not uncommon when someone just purchases a house to get a full-blown analysis of what's going on. So they sort of understand. I mean, if you've lived in the house for 30 years, you have a pretty good understanding, and maybe, you know, you've done half the things already. But depending on the circumstances, and it's the kind of conversation that you really should have with the contractor, because as long as you're on the same page, then, you know, there's no surprises at the end of the day. So that's all I would say about that.
And Beth asks, I think she's talking about hopefully a weatherization project and not the energy audit. It says only one contractor was available for the work because of the distance, over 1 hour drive. They would only do the whole project, which was not doable cost-wise and financing. In addition, I was told I needed to leave my house for 24 to 48 hours while foam was drying. Is that normal procedure?
Well, the health and safety is going to a minimum of 24, or a minimum, I believe, is 24 hours. So that is really an important part of spray foaming, is that it goes through a curing process. And so there is the need to not be in the house when that happens. And even in new construction, when we did pre-drywall inspections and stuff, we were all very, very much aware of the fact that we were not supposed to be on site, you know, when spray foaming was happening, and, you know, need that time for the stuff to cure. So, and it's unfortunate, you know, geographics is a big part in a rural state. And so that's sort of a hard nut to crack when someone has to travel a long distance. And I, you know, my sympathy goes out to you. I sort of understand the dilemma, because I live in the Northeast Kingdom. So if you're in Canaan, that's a long haul to go up there and back again. So that's unfortunate, yeah.
I would concur with what Bruce said. I think there's a recognition that some areas of the state are harder to reach. It's something that we're working on with a lot of our partners to try and increase capacity so that there's more folks available to do the work. So a lot of people are focused on it, and we're hoping that we can convince more folks to join the weatherization workforce. So if anyone here on this line has people who are on the edge and want to make a positive contribution, I also encourage you to encourage them to reach out to us, because we are always looking for folks who might be interested in joining this effort. So we might have opportunities available for them to get trained, or to connect with some of our partners who are running training programs, but definitely something that's top of mind. I think it's been in the news a lot lately that you know, there's a big eye on skilled trades in the workforce, and we're so grateful that the contractors that we partner with are so diligent and so passionate about the work. And I know that they're all very interested in having more folks join them as well. So yeah, I empathize with you, and I echo Bruce's comments. Definitely hard when there's not a ton of people available, but it's something that we're definitely mindful of and working on, and hope to be able to provide more support for soon.
Scott in the chat asks, he has one corner, this is talking about moisture. He has one corner in his basement that has some moisture every few years. He's wondering if it's wise to insulate the rest of the basement walls until that moisture issue is addressed.
Well, that is one of the issues with existing houses. Sometimes we can't get the whole enchilada. So we sort of say, if we can get 80%, then we're going to take it. And so that's not uncommon for people to avoid a section like that. And sometimes it gets addressed, you know, the moisture issue gets addressed later on, and sometimes it doesn't. But for the most part, that product is not, you know, you can't be spray foaming or adhering rigid foam board to a part of the basement that has a moisture issue. And so the other piece is sometimes you can address that from the outside. Is it, you know, is there a valley there? Can you grade it away? Gutters, downspouts. So sometimes you try to, if it's bulk water that's coming off the roof, sometimes you manage it and move it away from the, I mean, even in new construction, you know, the theory is get the moisture away from the foundation as soon as possible. So if you can get it, address the moisture, then you can get the whole basement. But it's not uncommon in existing houses to not be able to get everything.
Hopefully this wasn't already addressed in the chat. I think this is in relation to our home energy loan. Someone asks, if you qualify for a program because of income and your income improves, are you allowed to stick with the original financing and complete the payments on the original terms? And that might be a question for one of our partners in the chat, but Robin, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I would defer to our partners in the chat. I think certainly a lot of times with our programs, we're looking at the income at time of application. And certainly if that income eligibility changes over time, there might be some onus to report that back. But I think that's where we have a lot of strength in our lending partners through the home energy loan, because they do navigate a lot of these situations on behalf of folks who are engaging with our programs. So Lisa, if you're out there and you want to provide an answer, happy to defer to you. But yeah, I can't speak highly enough of VSECU, Opportunities Credit Union, and NeighborWorks, who help diligently guide customers through the home energy loan experience, and might be able to answer these sticky questions.
Let's see. Hope I'm not missing anything. Someone asks, in a basement, how do you insulate foundation cement walls and not creating mold?
So typically what happens is right now the code is looking for a minimum of R15 continuous on a foundation wall. So if it's a smooth wall, either cinder block or poured concrete, then oftentimes what's happening is you're gluing rigid foam board to that wall. Now, in theory, with mold, you need moisture and you need a certain amount of humidity. And then when you insulate your basement, you are actually, so once again, we need to address any of the moisture problem that's happening in the basement first, sort of tied in with the previous, one of the previous concerns. But if in fact the basement is relatively dry and there aren't those issues, then oftentimes when you do apply rigid foam board or spray foam, if it's a stone foundation, it would be spray foam product, then you actually reduce the amount of moisture in the basement because it runs warmer, because now you're not losing, you know, concrete has an R value of 0.1 per inch, Robin. And so if you have a typical 8-inch concrete wall, it's performing at 0.8 R value. And the code's trying to get you to 15 minimum. That's the wimpiest R value they're asking for. So when you do, in fact, insulate a foundation wall, oftentimes the basement will run drier because it's warmer and you're keeping all the heat in the basement, and all the waste heat, if there's heating equipment down there, that stays in the basement as well. So usually it'll actually run drier, and that should avoid the idea of mold growing, unless there's some specific situation there. But in practice, that's how it typically works.
Thanks, Boris. We did get some clarification from Lisa from VSECU in the chat, and Mia for the WRAP program as well. So hopefully that information is helpful. I think we have gotten to all the questions. So, oh, we have another one. Okay, I spoke too soon. Anne asks, my ceiling in my garage has blown in insulation. I have a white mold problem in the garage and upstairs over the garage. Is the insulation in the ceiling over the garage okay? Don't know.
Well, that's hard to know. Sitting here in my little office, and I'm not a mold expert per se, but you know, whenever we look at insulation, we always try to say, hey, is there a source of moisture here? Is it trapping moisture? Is there ventilation going on? And I guess once again, I'm not really certain what the different types of mold. I'm not really knowledgeable on what the white mold might be, but. And even I don't know what the surfaces is that it's adhering to. So I don't have a good answer for that right here, to be honest with you. There are people who do mold remediation, and certainly the Vermont Public Health is the website is a good place to go for both asbestos. And I thought I saw something in the chat go by, can a contractor remove asbestos or vermiculite from my attic? And once again, typically a contractor shouldn't be doing that, but the Vermont Health Department has good resources for mold and sort of health issues as well. So that may be a source for that person to check into.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a lot of specific questions about their homes, and it's hard because we can't see them right now. So we did have another question I missed in the Q&A. Someone asked about bulkhead leaking. There's not much context. Bulkhead leaking, replace ? Interior door.
Yeah, so
I think put that together.
Yeah, I think what they're talking about is a bulkhead entry to a basement which is sort of oftentimes Bilco is the company that makes them, or the other companies, but it's a sort of 2 doors and you walk down a set of steps and then you pass into the basement. And so typically what you're trying to do is insulate the door at the bottom of the stairs. Ideally, you know, we're differentiating between the heated and unheated space, or maybe there's not intentional heat in the basement, but if you insulate the basement, then you would insulate the door at the bottom of the steps. And the bulkhead above is more or less for weather protection. It doesn't need to be insulated, but it needs to keep water out of that entryway. And so ideally, that's how that would get set up, would be to make the bulkhead doors waterproof, but have an insulated door at the bottom of the stairs, well air sealed and latched nice and tightly.
Great.
So I don't have an interior door at all in the basement. Thinking of putting in an interior door. So interior door meaning from the house into the basement, if that's what you're sort of thinking, then you're going to have to cut a hole and put a set of stairs that will take you into the basement. It's a lot more handy than having to run outside to get into the basement. But if that's what you're talking about, then an interior door would work there, because upstairs would be heated conditioned space. And typically we think of basements not as exterior spaces, but somewhat interior spaces. And we would certainly encourage you to insulate the foundation of your building. And then you could very well have an interior door, a little wood door or hollow core door, and you wouldn't need an exterior door there.
Right.
If I interpreted the question correctly.
Looks like they're saying from the bottom of the stairs. We don't need to go down this rabbit hole necessarily, but if you want to quickly answer, we totally can. We just have a few more minutes. I want to make sure we get to all the questions.
Can you that went by too rapidly for me to make, because then there was another door question after that. There was some clarification about that interior door. What was the?
It just said from the bottom of the stairs.
From the bottom of the stairs. Well,
I think you should call customer support after maybe potentially.
Or sign
and
up
then
for a virtual home energy visit. We'll have 90 minutes. And we can go over everything in your house. Yeah.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah. Someone asks, I'm replacing my front door with a fiberglass, good insulating door. Do I put a storm over it?
Well, you can. It's not going to hurt. Ideally, storms were meant to protect wood doors in the old days from the weather. But a storm door is nice because it adds another layer. But that insulated door that you're putting in is a nice product. It's got foam in it. It's got a high R value. It probably has a thermal pane piece of glass in it. And so, but yeah, storm is a good thing. It's not as necessary as it would be if you had a wood door, but because it's made out of fiberglass, it's protected from the elements. But storm door is nice. Then you can open up the interior door and have a screen door in the summertime. Yeah, storm door is good.
Okay. I think the last question we have is someone says that their basement gets very damp. They don't think it is a water leakage issue, but they have to run a dehumidifier, and they asked if that is energy efficient.
Well, if you have a damp basement, then you have to come up with a solution. Oftentimes, the reason the basement is damp is because it's below grade and it's cold. You know, the constant temperature of the earth is like 55 degrees. So the bottom of your basement slab is at 55 degrees. Well, unless there's some heat down there, but for the most part, it's down below in a cool location. And so cool air can't hold as much moisture as warm air. And so that's why basements tend to be sort of musty and damp to start with. Oftentimes, when you insulate a basement, if the walls don't have any insulation on them at all, and you move them from that 0.8 R value to R15, then a lot of that dampness can be alleviated. The other thing is, if it ever turns out you need to have to replace your hot water heater and it's down the basement, then you might want to think about a hybrid heat pump hot water heater, because it will dehumidify the basement to a certain degree, because the heat pump, and heat pumps, when they squeeze energy out of the air, they squeeze the moisture out of it too. So.
Great teaser for our next upcoming sessions, October 18th and 25th. We just have about 2 minutes, so I want to give you, Bruce and Robin, a chance, maybe final words, and then we can wrap up.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting us come by. It's always a pleasure to get out there. And I am hopefully, we've been able to answer people's questions, and it's always great working with both you, Becca, and Robin. So I can't thank you guys enough for inviting me along.
And I am Of course, I want to thank everyone on this call, both Bruce and Becca, and all the folks who help support these webinars, but also our partners who are here to answer questions and help out with this campaign. I think it's so important. We hear all the time from customers who have engaged with our weatherization programs, how they really hope that more people hear about it. So I think it's really important that everyone's here listening to us and contributing their questions. I think it's so great to have these conversations at a statewide level on an annual basis. And for all of those you out there who have weatherized, I just highly encourage you to share your stories with neighbors or others who are in your communities, because I think the more people who know about this and who can kind of attach to different experiences that we've all had, the more likely it is that more people will join us in our weatherization journey. So thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to the partners who donated some of their nighttime to contribute to this conversation. I'm just really grateful to be here.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect note to end on. So again, thanks everyone so much for joining. Please join us for our next upcoming heat pump sessions if you're interested, and have a good evening. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.